Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Today, inshallah, I'll be speaking about a lecture which I've given before. In reality, these are two separate lectures. And it's regarding Muslim history in Spain, how Islam entered into Spain. And also I'll speak about a movement called Al Murabitun, which originated from Mauritania, towards the south of the Saharan desert in Africa. So inshallah we'll begin to speak about the opening of Andalus, or Spain, to Islam and how that occurred. Firstly, whenever we speak about Islamic history, many people, they criticize Muslims for always referring back to our golden era, and many people view this as a sign that Muslims, as they say, we cry over the spilt milk. We are people who just reminisce about our past, and we are people who do not look to the future. However, if we were to look at the Quran, we will find that the Quran gives great attention to the study of history and to the study of previous nations, how they rose and how they fell. And so as Muslims, we should take heed of this and realize that the study of previous historical events yields great benefits for us. And especially the history of Spain, because the history of Spain, or Islam in Spain, lasted for 805 years. And many of us are oblivious to this fact that Islam was in Spain for 805 long years. And so, there's a lot that happened within this period, and there's a lot that we can learn from. Initially, and many of us are even oblivious to this fact that Islam entered into Spain in the year 92 after Hijrah. Subhanallah, only 92 years after the Hijrah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam had entered Spain. And we are oblivious to this, and we don't realize this. And so this period of 805 years of Islamic rule, we saw within this period the rise and the fall of many sub-Islamic states within side of Andalusia, or within side of Spain. We saw the emergence of great rulers, of courageous warriors. We saw the rise of hypocrites, the rise of treacherous rulers, and all of these things we can learn great things from. So therefore it is a history which is rich of ibrah, of lessons to be learnt. Therefore it is important that as Muslims we study this amazing and beautiful history, and also sad history of Islam in Spain. The first thing that I would like to mention, inshallah, is why is it that Islam, why did it spread to Spain? Why did the Muslims intend to go to Spain? Well, and why is it that, this question of Islam spreading by the sword, people will question the validity of this invasion, as some people might call it, or the conquest of Spain. Firstly, we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His Prophet, as He said in the Quran, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَالدِّينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. He is the one who sent the messenger with the huda, with the guidance and the religion of truth, that it may prevail over all other religions, even though the mushrikun and the polytheists may detest it. So as Muslims, we look to spread the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to every corner of this globe. This does not mean, though, that Islam spread by the sword. For as Allah says in the Quran, لا إكراها في الدين, there is no compulsion in religion. Islam and the Muslims never compelled individuals to accept Islam by the sword. Rather, we use the sword as Muslims to remove the obstacles to spread the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever a Muslim army would invade a country, they would give them options of either accepting Islam as a population, or accepting to pay the jizya, a tax, which they would pay, which is less than the rate of zakat, and therefore they could stay upon their religion, or they would have to face war. So what was spread by the sword was the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet people are allowed to remain upon their faiths. So it is wrong to say Islam spread by the sword in the sense that we forced individuals to accept Islam, and that is not the case. So that was a brief introduction to that point. Now, the word Spain, España, in Arabic, we usually refer to it as Andalusia. Al-Andalusia, which is even used today even in Spanish and in other Andalusia, in other languages as well. Now, what is the origin of this word, Andalusia? Prior to it being called Andalusia, as we know, Europe was a very dangerous place to live. Many different tribes would go around pillaging village from village, and where the strong used to devour the weak. And there were certain tribes that used to come from Scandinavia and Northern Europe, which were very well known for such practices of conquering villages and pillaging villages. Amongst those tribes were a tribe by the name of Wandal. Wandal, which, this is how we call it in Arabic, Wandal, or Wando in English. And this tribe, some historians, they differ as to the origins of this tribe. Some say it came from northern Scandinavia, some say it was from Germany. But anyhow, they were from a part in Europe, and they were like wahshi, as we say, very barbaric in their nature and very harsh with the people. And as I said, they would go around pillaging village from village to village. So they actually invaded Spain, and as a result, Wandal, this tribe, since they took it over, Spain was therefore known as Wandalisiya or Wandaliya. And this, then the pronunciation changed from Wandalisiya to Andalusia. So this was, subhanAllah, why it was called Andalusia. And this is even today, Vandal, the word vandalism is actually derived from this very root, from Vandal. This is where it comes from. Vandalism, when you go around pillaging and causing destruction, it earned its name from this tribe of the Vandals, or Wandal as we say in Arabic, the Vandals. So Vandal, Vandalusia, then Andalusia, which is very interesting. And then thereafter, when the Vandals, they left Spain, Spain was ruled by Christians who were referred to as, in Arabic, as we call them, Al-Qut. Al-Qut were the people, the Christians who used to rule Spain. Now, why did the Muslims intend to enter into Spain? As we know, the spreading of Islam, if you were to observe the spreading of Islam on a geographical map, you would find that Islam had spread from east to west, from east to west, and not really from north to south. And this is quite interesting because this actually fulfilled a prophetic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed Allah, He showed the earth to me, and I saw its east to its west was ruled by Allah, was ruled by the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There were Muslims dominating that region. Notice how he said from east to west and not from north to south. So obviously the Muslims, they spread in such a quick manner. They went into as far as the western Saharan desert, which is to the end of the African continent. And so the Muslims, they stopped and they realized they had come to an end, and it was too far for them to go to America. So the only option that they had was to go north. The only option that they had was to go north. And to the north of Africa, as we know, in particular Morocco, is Spain. And Spain was very, very close as well. So the Muslims, they wanted to direct themselves to the north. Now, this time, the Muslims were in northern Africa. By the time they wanted to enter into Spain, it was the year 92 after Hijrah, as we mentioned. Now, this was the era in which was the Umayyad dynasty, or in Arabic we call Bani Umayyah. They were in charge of the Islamic State, and at the leadership of them was the Khalifa Walid ibn Abdul Malik. Walid ibn Abdul Malik. And in order to really understand the nature of the conquest of Spain, we need to understand how Islam first entered into northern Africa. Okay? So we said, when did Islam enter in Spain? Roughly in the year 92 after Hijrah. Let us go back now in time. We're going to go back in time now, just to see what was the case, what was the situation with regards to Islam in northern Africa, because this will help us understand the process of how it was entered into Spain. So Islam entered into northern Africa in the year 32 after Hijrah, northern Africa, to the area of Al-Maghrib, only 32 years after Hijrah. This is truly amazing, subhanAllah, when you read the dates and how quick Islam had spread. 32 years after Hijrah. However, the problem was, many of the problems that Muslims faced was that as soon as the Muslims had conquered that area, it was only a short time until after the people, they apostatized from Islam. Especially the Barbar, or the Berbers as we say in English. The Berbers, they apostatized a lot from Islam, and this used to happen on a continual basis. So they would enter into Islam, then they would apostatize, and then Muslims would come back again, and they would have to reconquer, etc. So that region was very volatile, and it wasn't stable at all. So as a result, there was a Muslim ruler by the name of Musa ibn Nusayr, a very, very famous ruler of the Muslims, who had managed to bring some sort of stability to the region of North Africa. His name was Musa ibn Nusayr. Now remember, I'm going to mention a lot of names from now on, so just try and keep with me, inshallah. Let's just understand who Musa ibn Nusayr was. Musa, the son of Nusayr. Who was Nusayr? Nusayr, he was, at his young age, he was a Christian. He was brought up as a Christian. And he was caught as a captive during one of the battles of Khalid ibn Walid, the Sahabi, Khalid ibn Walid. And this was one of the battles of that opened up Al-Faris, or Persia, to Islam. So they caught this man whose name was Nusayr. And he was somebody who was quite learned in the Christian faith, and he was somebody who could read the Bible, and he knew the teachings of Christianity quite well. So Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, he discussed with Nusayr, and he managed to have debates with him, and they discussed the principles of Christianity and Islam until Nusayr, he accepted the call of Al-Islam, and he became a Muslim. And not just that, but Nusayr, when he accepted Islam, he became a great leader of the Muslims. He was somebody who learned the teachings of Islam, and he participated in many of the jihads as well. So he was somebody who had great tarbiyah. He knew Islam very well. He was a mujahid in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he grew up in the company of the likes of Khalid ibn Walid. So you can only imagine what a great personality he was. So his son, he had a son by the name of Musa. He had the son by the name of Musa, hence Musa ibn Nusayr. Now Musa, he also grew up in the atmosphere of jihad and the atmosphere of tarbiyah and the atmosphere of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And he ended up becoming a great leader until he took Islam to Africa. And in particular, he reopened Egypt in the year 85 after Hijrah. And so, but when he went further west into the Saharan desert and into Algeria and Tunisia and Al-Maghrib and Morocco, he found that there was a major problem, and we mentioned this problem, is that the people kept on apostatizing from the religion of Islam. And he found out that this was due to a number of reasons. One of the major reasons why the Berbers used to leave the fold of Islam very quickly was because the previous futuhat, as we refer to them as, the previous openings of Islam were very, very quick, meaning the armies will come, quickly take over, and then they'll go to another area. And so they would leave like almost a vacuum behind them, and people will enter into Islam, but they wouldn't know what the teachings of Islam were, because the soldiers that came and the ulama that came, they quickly went on to other regions. And so people were jahil, people were ignorant of their religion. So as a natural consequence, people left the fold of Islam very, very quickly. So as a result of that, Musa bin Nusayr, when he went back to Al-Maghrib, which is Morocco today, he realized that these are the two things he needs to work on. Number one, the futuhat, the openings of the lands to Islam, needs to be done in a more slower and precise manner. So he took his time. Not only that, he began to teach people more about Islam. And to the extent that these Berbers, they became very strong in their faith. And in fact, they became the Jund of Islam. They became the warriors for Islam. So from becoming a people that used to apostatize very, very quickly, they became a group of people who were educated about their religion, who were brought up upon Islam and upon jihad in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now all of Al-Maghrib at that time was now under the authority of Musa ibn Nusayr. And he had a firm handhold over that entire region. With exception to one particular area to the north of Morocco, which even up until today still exists, and it is called Sabta. Sabta was a small port to the north of Morocco, which was under the rule of a Christian. Now, so now that the Muslims were strong in Spain, strong in Al-Maghrib, strong in Morocco, with exception to Sabta, as we said, with exception to Sabta, they realized that the only way that they can go now is to go north. This is their next exploration, you can say, or their next task to spread Islam. Now they have to go north, because to the south, and there's not much in the south, there's just desert. There's just desert, not many people. But as for Spain, then it is a inhabited country which has, so the teachings of Islam, when people would enter into Islam, it would prove to be very, very beneficial. So they wanted to cross the waters and the strait that exists there and enter Islam into that country. Now the idea of entering Islam into Spain was not a new idea. It's something that existed even prior to that. In fact, Uthman ibn Affan, he reported, this is Sahabi Uthman ibn Affan, he said, تفتح القسطنطينية من قبل البحر فمن فتح الأندلس بالبحر فهم مشتركون في أجر من فتح القسطنطينية. He said, Constantinople, Constantine, which is in present-day Turkey, will be open to Islam from the sea. So whoever opens up Andalusia, via the sea, then they will share the reward of those who opened up Constantinople, of Constantine. Why? Because Constantine, as reported in Sunnah Hadith, will be opened up from the west. And the thing is, the only way you can get through the west is by actually going through, is by entering into Europe through Spain, and not through the east. So that's why Uthman ibn Affan, he saw that in order for Muslims to reach Constantine, which was prophesied in Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and they are an army which will be greatly rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they must conquer Spain first via the sea. So he would encourage people that whoever opens up Andalusia, they will have the same reward as those who open up Constantine, because they are a means to open up Constantine. However, there was a problem. Musa bin Nusayr, he had a great problem, and that was that the distance between Tanja, or Tangiers as we call it, Tanja, which is at the north, very north of Morocco, which is, so therefore, the closest point to Spain, there was a distance of 13 kilometers. Okay, there was a distance of 13 kilometers, there's associated 13 kilometers of sea between Tangiers and Spain, between Tanja and Spain. So 13 kilometers of sea, and the Muslims didn't have any boats, no boats whatsoever. It's a major problem. Any Muslims weren't accustomed to riding the sea. So they want to go into Spain, but they got no boat. So what did they do? That was one major problem. Second problem was that to the southeast of Spain, there were certain islands which were called Bilyar, Juzur Bilyar, as we say in Arabic. There were small islands to the southeast of Spain, and these islands were controlled by the Roman Empire. These islands, they were controlled by the Roman Empire. And therefore, and if they wanted to cross into Spain, they would have these islands on the east, which will serve as a threat to the Muslims going through into Spain. So this was another major problem. The third major problem was that, remember the port we mentioned, Ceuta, which was a port to the north of Morocco. We said that was controlled not by the Muslims, but controlled by a king, Julian, or in English we say Julian. And Julian was a Christian king, and he was in control of Ceuta. And he had a very good relationship with the previous Spanish king, whose name was Ghaytasha. Ghaytasha in Arabic. I'm not sure how you say his name in Spanish, but in Arabic we said his name was Ghaytasha. So Julian, who was in control of Ceuta, the port in Morocco, he had a very good relationship with the previous king of Spain, Ghaytasha. Now Ghaytasha, as he was the previous king, he was actually removed from power by force by the Spanish king Rodrigo. In Arabic we refer to him as the Ludriq. In English or Spanish he's known as Rodrigo. Another problem that the Muslims faced was the force. The Muslim army was dispersed across all of North Africa, and they didn't really have a large number in Morocco at that time. That was another problem. A fifth problem was that the army of the Christians was very, very strong, and they had a huge number of soldiers. That was another problem. Sixth problem was that Andalusia, the land itself, the terrain of Spain, was completely, they had no knowledge whatsoever. The Muslims had no knowledge of the terrain of Spain. Now it's important that whenever you go into battle, that you are aware of the terrain. Even up until today, you'll find that before even like the armies invade another country, like before Afghanistan, they invaded Iraq. Before America invaded Afghanistan, they would send drones and planes, and they would study the terrain before sending their soldiers out there. But the Muslims had no knowledge; they had no idea. They've never, stepped one foot inside of Spain, so they had no knowledge. So this was something very, very dangerous and very, very problematic for them. So their plan. So how would they overcome all of these problems? Well, the first plan is that they had to build boats. They had to build boats in order to cross the strait into Spain. Secondly, Musa bin Nusayr, he had to teach the people about Islam in more detail. So what he took a group of the Berbers, and he used to sit with them in special circles of knowledge. Majalis khassa, in special circles of knowledge. So he would really teach them about Islam, make their iman very, very strong, and that they knew the Quran and Sunnah very, very well. So in order for him to form a very, very strong army. And this is what he did. And that is why the majority of the soldiers in Northern Africa at that time became from the Berbers. The Berbers, which really originate from the western part of the Saharan desert. And just remember, subhanAllah, that these very same Berbers, they used to apostatize very, very quickly. So from becoming very, very weak into their faith, they became the soldiers of Islam in North Africa. And this shows you the effect of tarbiyah. This shows you the effect of education, of tarbiyah, and teaching people knowledge and what effect it can have on the people. And Musa bin Nusayr, he appointed a man by the name, which I'm sure many of us know, Tariq ibn Ziyad. Tariq ibn Ziyad. Remember this name, because wallahi this name, it deserves to be written in gold. Tariq ibn Ziyad. Who was also a Berber, subhanAllah. He was also a Berber. He appointed him to be in control of the battle, or to be in control of the conquest of Spain. So, and he was somebody who mastered the Arabic language, and he mastered Berberiya as well, the Berber language. And it shows you, subhanAllah, how the Muslims had no concept of racism. And these were, remember, the Arabs, they're the ones who opened up these lands, but now they've given it back to the Berbers themselves. So, so he appointed Tariq ibn Ziyad to take control of this conquest. The first thing that they wanted to do was sort out the problem with regard. They've already started to build the boats. They wanted to sort out the problems regarding the small islands. Remember, we mentioned the southeast of Spain, Juzur Bilyar. Bilyar was a small group of small pockets of islands, and they wanted to go there first and take control of these islands first. So this is what they did. So therefore, the Muslims now had a backup, and they had some sort of protection in order to have a safe passage into Spain. But they still had another problem. Even if they went and crossed into the sea, they had the problem of Ceuta. Remember Ceuta, which is the port which was in control by the Spanish, or by the king Julian. So imagine if they went into sea, they will have Julian behind him, who was a Christian king. Okay, he was Christian, so he would have been problematic. And he was an enemy. Remember, Julian, he was an enemy to the present king in Spain, Rodrigo, because he was a friend of the previous king of Spain, Ghaytasha, but therefore he was an enemy with the king of the present king in Spain, whose name was Rodrigo. So what did he do? The king of, or the leader, maybe not king, but the leader of Ceuta, Julian, he actually came out with a truce, or he came out with an agreement to form with Tariq ibn Ziyad. He said, I will give you three things. Number one, I will give you the control of the port of Ceuta. You can have Ceuta if you want. Secondly, I will give you boats. I will allow you to borrow our boats. Thirdly, I will give you information about the nature of the terrain within Spain. You can imagine, Tariq ibn Ziyad became very happy. He's got control of Ceuta now. He's got the boats. He's got the information. He's got everything that he needs to conquest Spain. But there's one thing that he wanted in return. All he wanted in return was that when the Muslims conquer Spain, that the pockets of land and territory, okay, that that the previous king Ghaytasha had, that it would be given to Julian, because the sons of Ghaytasha, they wanted to have a share of that land, but they couldn't. So Julian, he wanted to give that land to them. So he wanted to have control of that land. That's all he wanted, and they're just pockets of land, like fields, etc., not major parts of Spain. And so the Muslims, they had a treaty with came to an agreement with Julian with regards to this. Tariq ibn Ziyad, he was very happy by this, so he went to Musa bin Nusayr, and he went to and he told him about this offering. And Musa bin Nusayr was very happy at first, but he said, look, in order for us to be absolutely sure, let us just send a small renaissance mission, which we will send a small army, just to a small group of soldiers, just to see whether the information that Julian is given is correct, because he thought maybe this Christian king is trying to deceive them, because it sounded too good to be true. So they found out that that the information was absolutely correct, and so they began their journey to Spain now. So now the year is Ramadan 91 after Hijrah. The year is now Ramadan 91 after Hijrah. And Musa ibn Nusayr, he formed an army of 7,000 soldiers. 7,000 soldiers, which is not actually much if you're trying to conquest the whole peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula. And as we know, by the time he formed the 7,000 soldiers, the year was Sha'ban, 92 in Sha'ban. And leading them was Tariq ibn Ziyad. Now, when Tariq ibn Ziyad, he crossed the straits, he landed at a mountain, Jabal. In Arabic we call it Jabal. And this is where he landed. And up until today, it's called Jabal Tariq. Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq. And we translate this into English as Gibraltar. Gibraltar is just a Spanish way of basically saying Jabal Tariq. That is the name. Even up until date, it still has this name. And so he entered from Jabal Tariq. He entered and he met with some of the Christian forces, and he offered them to enter into Islam. Enter into Islam. And this was just a small. He just met he didn't meet the major army of the Christians. He met, like, maybe you can call the equivalent of the border control soldiers or what have you. He met them and he offered them Islam. If they don't accept Islam, they have to pay the jizya. If not, then they have to face a skirmish in that area. And this is what happened. They had a fight, and the Muslims, they took control of the very, very southern parts of Spain. Now, the leader of this Himaya, the leader of the sea guards, maybe you can call them, of the Christian, they sent a letter to Rodrigo, who at that time was in Tulaytara. Tulaytara is, I think today they call it Toledo, which was at that time the capital of the Christians within Spain. And he said, subhanallah, in this letter that he sent to Rodrigo, he said, Adrikna fa inna, he said, basically come to us, for indeed we have met a people and we don't know whether they are people that come from this earth or whether they are people that come from the skies. And this was an army that they've never encountered before in their lives. Are they people of this earth, or are they people from the skies? Are they angels? And are these people? They couldn't believe it. And they described them as people that during the nights they'd be like monks, and during the day they would fight like the most fiercest of warriors. So these were unique individuals, and people they've never laid eyes on before in their lives. So as a result, Rodrigo, he formed an army of 100,000 soldiers. Remember the Muslims, how many Muslims were there? 7,000. 7,000 Muslim soldiers. Rodrigo, he prepared an army of 100,000 soldiers. So it's more than just 7,000. You have 93,000 more soldiers. And look at him. When he sent these 100,000 soldiers, he sent a convoy of camels, of donkeys that were carrying ropes. And what were these ropes for? These ropes were for tying up the hands of the Muslim soldiers. A convoy of donkeys carrying ropes. Because they thought, we're going to send 100,000 soldiers. We're going to defeat this Muslim army very quickly. Just 7,000 soldiers. Now, so Tariq ibn Ziyad, he was then joined by another group of soldiers because he realized that 7,000 might not be enough. So Musa ibn Nusayd, he sent another army of just 5,000 more. Okay, just 5,000 more. So now they had a total of 12,000 soldiers. So 12,000 soldiers, and this extra 5,000 soldiers was led by Tarif bin Malik. So they have a total of 12,000 soldiers now. So now they've gathered their army together, and Tariq ibn Ziyad, he began to search for a suitable place to fight, and he found a valley which was called Wadi Birbat. Wadi Birbat, or was also referred to as Lukka. Some people pronounce it as Lekka, some people pronounce it as Likka. So the valley of Birbat, which was called Lukka, Lekka or Likka. And where he was, this valley, if you can try and imagine this valley now. So you're in the middle of a valley. To the left of you, you have a small lake. It was actually quite big, but it wasn't like a reservoir, but it was quite a average-sized lake. And to the right of them, there was a huge mountain. And behind of them, there was a huge mountain as well. So the only opening was to the front. And that was the only gap that they had. So, it was as if the Muslims were cornered off within this area. They had the lake, which they couldn't cross, a mountain to the right and a mountain to the back. And Tariq ibn Ziyad, he had his army right in the middle of all of that. the 7,000. And Tarif ibn Malik was behind the mountain to the south, which was the 5,000. This was the very same tactic that was deployed by Khalid ibn Walid in one of his battles in Spain, in Faris, in Persia. So he's adopting the very, very same tactic, as we will see, inshallah. So the battle, it began on the 28th of Ramadan. The 28th of Ramadan in the year 92. And subhanAllah, look how many of these amazing battles it took place in the blessed month of Ramadan. Because the month of Ramadan historically has been known to be the month of jihad. And this historically has been known for the month in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory to the believers. The battle, it commenced, as we said, on the 28th of Ramadan, and it continued for 8 days. 8 days. Now subhanAllah, yeah, we have to remember the nature of warfare in the past. It wasn't how it is today. The nature of warfare today is very limited, in the sense that the battles only rage for a few hours, maybe a couple of days at most. People are standing far away from each other. It's very rare that you'll find soldiers come into contact with one another. But this was 8 days of continuous fighting where the enemy is right in front of your face. So you had to be fighting. And so the situation was very, very dim. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to the believers, and it was said that the believers killed the majority of this army of 100,000. Subhanallah. And it was said that the Muslims only lost 3,000 soldiers. The Muslims only lost 3,000 martyrs out of the 12,000. So an army of 12,000 defeated an army of 100,000. And as a result, the reports, they differ as to what happened to Rodrigo. Some of them say he fled, and then others say later on he died. But without a doubt, anyway, he lost his power and authority, and the Muslims were victorious in this most amazing battle. The historians, the Western historians, up until today, they cannot fathom as to how the Muslims defeated the Spanish army at this time. They couldn't understand how they could have done that. It was not militarily possible how they achieved such a great feat. So in their books, they try to justify this defeat through a number of ways. One of them is the famous narrating they have that the Tariq ibn Ziyad, he burnt the boats. He burnt his boats. Why? Because they said Tariq ibn Ziyad, he gave an option to the soldiers, and he gave no option to the soldiers. So he burnt the boats, and he said, look, you have no boats behind, you can't flee back to Morocco. So the only option you have in front of you is either death or victory. Now it's up to you for you to choose. So, and he's making the Muslims seem as though they had no option but to fight for their lives. But this, as you would find, this incident of burning the boats doesn't exist in any of the reports of the Muslim books of history. It doesn't exist at all. And not only that, it doesn't actually make sense for a number of reasons. Number one, because majority of these boats, they were on loan. He took them loan from the Christian ruler of Septa, Julian. And as Muslims, we're not allowed to borrow something from somebody and then just burn it. It's not their property to do so. Now these were people of taqwa. Tariq ibn Ziyad was a person of taqwa and wara', of someone who feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wouldn't do such a thing. He would never have done such a thing. Secondly, it is not within the attitude of these great mujahideen that they feared death. They didn't fear death. In fact, when they left Morocco, they were hoping for either shahada, the victory, to be martyred in the way of Allah, or to gain victory. So they weren't people who feared death and they wanted to flee back to Morocco. This was not within their attitudes. And it shows you how, therefore, subhanAllah, the Western sources, they distort many aspects of our great history. And this, subhanAllah, this incident, it really brings life to this ayah of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَم مِّن فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And how many small groups were able to defeat large armies by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with this, the Muslims were able to defeat the army of Rodrigo. And then they went further north into Ishbiliya, or Seville, which was one of the greatest cities of southern Spain, and they were able to, alhamdulillah, gain power and authority within this land. And the Muslims began to take jizya from the inhabitants of Spain. And remember, jizya itself, this tax that the non-Muslims they would pay to the Muslims, was less than zakah. In fact, it said that only men would be required to pay the jizya, not women, whereas women have to pay zakah if they have the ability to do so. And the rate of it was only like 1 dinar, which is one coin of gold, which they had to pay on a yearly basis. And in response to that, just by paying this jizya, they are protected by the Islamic State. Their wealth, their property, and their life was protected by the Islamic State. And Islam flourished. Islam truly flourished. And that is why we find so many great scholars emanating from Spain, from the likes of Ibn Hazm, from the likes of Imam al-Qurtubi, from the likes of Al-Hafidh ibn Abd al-Barr. And these great scholars, they all came from this area of... Qurtubi itself comes from the Qurtuba, or Cordoba, which is in southern Spain. And many other scholars, you have there's Abu Umar, Imam al-Qurtubi, there's another, also we have the Maliki scholar Ibn al-Arabi, who was also from Spain. So these scholars, we had a great heritage in Islamic scholarship, and not only that, we flourished in respect to the standard of living in Spain increased manifold, and this is actually one of the reasons why the Muslims became weak within Spain, because they became too accustomed to the luxury, the comfort that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them, and therefore they began to depart from their religion. But that's another discussion altogether. As to how exactly Islam flourished in Spain, and this is not really what we're going to cover in this particular dars. But that is how Islam entered into Spain.